Well, I want to welcome everybody on the teleconference call today. Today is day one for NRCT. I do want to I should have said this before I started the recording, but I want to make sure that if you're not on a landline, that you call in and actually are on a receiver on a landline, because what will happen is there'll become so much feedback on the teleconference, then it'll disrupt the entire conference call. If you do put it on speakerphone, be cautioned because that also gives a lot of feedback. So if you can just make sure you're on a receiver. If you have another person who also needs to be on the conference call and you're in the same office, if you'll just call from another phone within the office, that'll be perfect. And then that way we don't have to worry about the speakerphone actually causing any kind of feedback. But I want to welcome everybody on day one today. And Dr. Cassidy, you were talking about getting through to the patient and it being difficult, day one taking a long time.
Yes.
Tell me, kind of share with me what you're experiencing, because it's probably what everybody else is experiencing on the conference call. And since today is all about day one, I wanted to give you some good fine steps that you could do to handle that.
Well, I noticed that the people tend to repeat themselves quite a bit, and they kind of go into a story, and then they go into another story about this, and oh, this is how they got that. You got to step in, you got to stop them. And then you got to get real with them. And that's kind of, sometimes I do it all right, and sometimes it's just a little bit tense in there, and that's kind of what I was getting at. But it does seem to take it takes longer than a regular patient, for sure.
And it will. And let me kind of give you an understanding of why it does take longer with an NRCT person. With somebody who's got that many conditions or is in that kind of shape, logically, they're not thinking on a normal basis, unfortunately. They tend to have so much going on that they're just trying to kind of struggle from day to day. So for sure, they tend to repeat themselves. They go into stories, and you're absolutely right. You do have to interrupt them. But one of the places that I want to make sure that everybody on the conference call starts with is when your NRCT person actually comes in and sits down, the first thing you have to ask them is, why are you here? What is it, and then the next thing that you have to ask is, what is it that you're wanting to achieve? Because basically what you see with NRCT people is they've been to tons of doctors, nobody's helped them, and then they come in and they're skeptical, like, could you even help them?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's worse with that is then they, go into these stories, and unfortunately their stories aren't beneficial to anyone. However, it's what got them to where they are, so they feel like they're helpful to themselves. So you have to kind of understand their stories. When they give you a story, the best thing to do is to interrupt the story and feed it back to them almost verbatim. And when you feed that story back to them almost verbatim, what will happen is that patient will go, oh my gosh, somebody actually heard me. Because one of the things that happens with an NRCT person is they don't ever feel heard. I mean, if you look at the scope of how messed up they are, and they go to doctors, and the doctors keep just throwing drugs at them, and they're over there with the doctor saying, hey, look, this happened way back then, and then, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and they get into this song and dance kind of story, and the problem with that song and dance kind of story is it doesn't ever produce a result with the medical doctor, and the medical doctor doesn't ever acknowledge that it even existed. They go, okay, you got that? Okay, here's what we need to do. We just need to you need to take this drug, this drug, this drug, this drug, and in 10 minutes they're in and out of that doctor's office, and now they're with the PA. And so the PA is now helping this person, and so now the person feels compelled to tell their story to see if the PA will help them. And that physician's assistant gets lost because they have no clue what to do, so they shoo about the office. So your NRCT people, the problem is they've never felt heard. And so when you're looking at, how can you best handle one of those types of, and not all NRCT people are like that, but when you have one of those, the best way to handle that type of patient is to give them a few minutes to actually get some of it off of their chest. And then the next thing that you have to do is you've got to turn around and reiterate it and say, I absolutely understood you. So let me make sure, in case I missed something, let me make sure. So this started when you were 25 years old, when you hit your head, and then you went to XYZ doctor, and they gave you this and this drug, and then you ended up having neck pain on top of the head spinning, and then Then you've got blurred vision, and so you tried many years trying to find the right glasses. That never worked, so you knew it wasn't a vision problem. And then you saw this specialist and that specialist. My goodness, have they given you the runaround? See, at that point, your patient will actually go, oh, my God, somebody heard me. My goodness, somebody's actually listening. And that's really what they're looking for. Unfortunately, to some degree, some NRCT patients have symptoms because they gain something from them, whether it's attention, whether it's they get to go see people, or whether it's people are like loathing all over them because they have these problems and they like to hear, oh, me, oh, my, oh, this, that. But one of the things I'm going to caution you with is make sure when you have these people who are suffering and they're looking for sympathy is that you don't feed it. Feeding it will not get them under care. It'll just get them to go to the next doctor and give the next doctor the same kind of story. So you kind of have to be very direct with NRCT patients as much as possible and understand that their conditions usually are such, their bodies are so broken down that sometimes that is difficult. And you don't want to be direct where you're rude and you have conversation that repels them. But you want to be direct in your questioning so that your patient actually goes, oh, my God, I have to look at what he's saying. Oh, that's painful. I don't want to look. And you have to know that your patient doesn't want to look at what you're saying. That's one of the reasons why they give you a story. So if once they feel heard, they can't give you that story again because they know you got it. Yeah. So that's what you really have to look at. So the first place that you want to start with when you're starting on day one with an NRCT patient is the two questions. One, why are you here? See, that's the first thing you've got to get them to look at, because all the other doctors that they go to, they know why they're there. They're there to get drugs. That's what the doctor's going to give them. The doctor doesn't have any other solution other than testing and drugs. That's it. So 90% of them are going to get a drug, if not 105%, if I could be so bold to say that. So, you know, when you first ask that question, it's going to be like a little bit like they're like a deer caught in the headlight. Like, oh, my gosh, I don't know. Why am I here? Oh, because Sally told me to come. Well, why did Sally tell you to come here? Oh, because she had such great results, and she thinks I could have great results. That's where your second question comes in is, what are you looking for? What is it that you want to achieve? And see, this will be the first time an NRCT person's been asked, what is it that they want to achieve? We already know they're a mess, but they need to understand what is it that they want to achieve. Oh, I don't know if I can achieve anything because my doctor told me I had to live with it for the rest of my life. If they spit that at you, then you've got to question it and find out, well, why are you here? If you really feel like you have to live with this for the rest of your life, what is it that you're looking for from me? Because, see, if they sit on that kind of knowledge where they feel like they're going to be living with this symptom or 1,800 symptoms that they have for the rest of their life, it doesn't matter what communication or what question that you ask those patients, it will not produce a result. Because at the end of day 4, they're still sitting on, well, no one can help me. Because that doctor way back when said no one can help me. Well, then the question is, why do they keep going to doctors? And the truth of it is because there's some glimmer of hope somewhere that there is help. So you have to get that kind of communication pulled from your patient and have your patient be able to discuss that with you. And that's the reason why those two questions are so vitally important before you even begin with what their symptoms are. And now, you know, one, why are you here? Tell me why you're here. And you have to do it very sincerely. If you do it kind of abrupt, you're going to come off with repelling communication. You know, there's two types of communications. There's one that repels people away, and there's one that attracts people. And if you do it very sincerely, as if, you know, like you really care about the person, which you should, then it'll be just fine, and it'll come across just perfect, and the person will actually open up and communicate with you. Once you get that question addressed, then you're going to address the next question is, what is it that you want to achieve? And then this way, your patients should now be into communication with you to some degree. And you should have kind of an understanding of why they're there. whether it's, somebody sent them there, or, oh my gosh, you're my last hope, doc. I've been to every other person, and, finally I decided to try this. I don't think it's going to work, but at least I'm going to try it. You got to kind of understand, where are they coming from? Before you begin your day one, you got to kind of get into their head to find out, what are they thinking? And then you have to pull that out and address it. And then your next step is to find out, what is their major concern? Have they fibromyalgia? Do they have a neurological condition? I mean, what is it that brought them, and why is it that they really want help? And once you find that out, then the next thing that you're going to address is, how long has it been there? How often does it happen? And how bad does it get? So you want them to describe the pain to you. Is it burning? Is it dull? Is it achy? Is it knife-like? Is it stabbing? Is it sharp? You want to kind of find out the condition itself. Like I said before, if they go into a story, just like Dr. Cassidy said, you're going to have to stop their story, reiterate it, because this is when they go into storytelling, is when you start asking about their condition. They might tell you the whole 20 years of the condition, and you don't want that, and you don't want to have to spend that much time with the person. So give them a couple of minutes to get the kind of communication they need off their chest, and then you can simply just tap them on the knee and say, listen, I want to make sure I really understood what you just said, and then reiterate it back to them. And then they're going to go, wow, my gosh, somebody heard me. And then it's like, oh, you're going to see a slight change, a slight shift in that person, to the point where they might even communicate very clearly now with you. And they might ask you questions. There's some patients that you'll have to do that 3 or 4 times, and you'll have to finally just tap them on the knee and say, listen, I don't know if I can help you, but if I can, there are some specific questions I have to ask to make sure that you're in the right place. And then, by the time you do it the second or third time, they'll get it, and they'll go, oh, I did it again, didn't I, doc? And they'll actually start stopping themselves. And that's when they finally understand that they kind of are motor mouths, and they just kind of run their mouth. That's the best way I know how to say that. So that's what you're looking for in the first few steps, is to actually ask the 2 questions, find out about their condition. Once you find out about their condition, then you want to find out kind of their trauma history and find out, what's happened. And before you find out about their trauma history, what I would tend to do is I would find out if they want, like, full health care, not just partial health care, but like full health care. And I would simply just ask them, after I found out, whatever their major concern is, how long has it been there, how often does it happen, describe it to me. I would sit down with them and I'd say, Jill, listen, there's a couple different ways we can address your situation. We can address exactly what you just discussed with me, or we can take a look at some underlying causes and find out if they're contributing to your symptoms. For example, adrenal glands, when they get stressed, they can actually accumulate and have problems that happen. And when those problems, when they start deteriorating or become problematic, the adrenal glands aren't producing the proper adrenaline, or they're producing too much, and then you can have fatigue when you actually have adrenal problems, and it could be contributing to whatever factors that you have going on. On top of that, you could have some chemical toxicity. It's not uncommon for somebody in your situation to have chemical toxicity that's also going on, that's helping create your condition. So when we address your condition today, there's one of 2 things I can do. I can take a look at what you just came in for, or I can take a look at your whole entire health and the underlying causes and find out if you have a chemical problem, adrenal problem, a neurological problem, or maybe a combination of all 3. So we can look at one situation, or we can take a look at your entire health. What would be a better value to you? And on those words, I'm just going to share with you, when you ask a person what would be a better value to you and they have to answer, they're now there for their entire health. There's not very many people that are going to say, well, doctor, you can just get rid of just this one thing, that would be fine. I mean, generally speaking, most of them are going to say, hey, look, why don't you address the whole thing? Or they might ask questions.